the gateways to divinity. There is a part, a place, an arena within the human psyche where the veils are thin, where the structures that obscure the larger fabric of reality of which we are each a part are transparent. And the luminosity, the wonder, the transcendent state that is the pinnacle of ecstasy, the pinnacle of what we might call divine, comes through the individual and blesses the one standing before the light. The best way that I can describe this is as a series of doorways and gates. That you stand here, looking at me, as a gate. And behind that gate, another gate. And behind that gate, when that gate is honored, when that gate is loved with honor, when that gate is respected, is looked at and looked at again, respect, to see and see again. When the gate is honored, there is an opening. And sometimes 5 gates deep, sometimes a dozen or so. When all of the gates of the self are open, we see through the transparent structure of the self into the light, the transcendent light that is all around us, and yet which we never see until we let go of all that we are and allow that light, allow that energy to flow. Light is actually not a correct word. It is a transcendent unipolar force beyond the polarity of the black and the white, the dark and the light. It's an energy that is beyond the duality of our paradigm. And ecstasis, ecstasy, beyond the stasis, beyond the structure. That presence surrounds all reality and every human being, and is obscured by the many doorways of physicality, of a sense of self, of all the structuring that every cult gives to its people to mask the divine, mask that transcendent light from coming through. The most sacred path, sacred in its facility to facilitate ecstasy, transcendence, beauty, truth, and goodness, that archetypal ideal in the Platonic tradition. That archetypal ideal through which it is this world that seems dreamlike and like a shadow. That doorway in consciousness facilitated by the endogenous DMT in our own brain. That some touch in the near-death experience, that some touch with the discipline of meditation, that some touch facilitated by the injection or smoking of DMT. The opening up to a state of awareness in which the self dissolves, and what is left is all that was there before, during, around, and after the self, all that is bigger than the self, that cannot fit into the box of our concepts, our thoughts. The most sacred, the most valuable experience a human being can have with another human being is meeting the divine, is walking the sacred path through one doorway of self into another. And as we do, we work backwards through the ages to a younger and younger age, into the innocence in the tarot deck represented by the Fool. The innocence, and parting the veils, beyond sadness and sorrow, beyond sweetness and joy, parting the veils, to meet the transcendent faces, the archetypal faces, out of which the fields are generated for every persona within the human psyche, every persona that could be, that has been, that will be, beyond. To the face that has no name, to the face that is beyond past, present, and future, beyond time, to the face that is beyond dogma and polarity, and thus can heal all imbalances, all wounds and diseases, distortions, mentally, emotionally. It is beyond thought, beyond feeling. It is the great pinnacle of human consciousness to come to the edge of that doorway and breathe deeply into something that is beyond human consciousness, to willingly step forward into a domain in which the one that willingly steps ceases to exist, and in ceasing to exist becomes that domain where the illusion of distinction and border dissolves. And there is only one. Within the grime, the klutz, the clutter, the trash and detritus of cult culture, very little of this light and energy makes its way through the maze of dogmas, the maze of paradigms, the maze of delusions, shames, and traumas, the maze of ignorance, the maze of distraction, the maze of lies, to a light like a butterfly for a few seconds here and there, a memory of something that's much brighter, something more beautiful than anything that's going on around here, and yet cannot be captured in the words that are too small to describe it. A memory, something. Animals seek the transcendent state. Dolphins sometimes catch a pufferfish which has a nerve gas, which, if consumed a little bit too much, can paralyze or even kill an enemy, but in just the right dose, as the dolphins toss the puffer fish back and forth, a transcendent moment. Certain birds or bees seek the alcohol, the taste of something that alters the normal state. It is in the altered state that we rattle the structure of the prison enough to remember the bars and have a sense of something on the other side. Plant-based medicines for thousands and thousands of years the drunken dervishes, the whirling dervishes, to create, through the dissociation of this world, a dissociation, a disorientation, a trance, fasting, the disembodiment, to penetrate a little bit of the cage in which we reside. And the path of love, the path of the Sacred Heart, a doorway into something, a moment, a glimpse of that light, that divinity in the one that we love, the one that we, through our love, move beyond the illusion of separation to surrender the prism, the prison, the defense, to keep separate, to treat you differently than myself, the defense, the boundary. And through the oneness with one other, the spell, the memory of a place and a time in which we are all part of a great circle. A circle that has no name. As we reach the edge of the human psyche and own the one that is everything and everyone who has ever been and will be, and every experience, like the great color wheel, from black to white to yellow to red, a color wheel of beautiful possibility. What I want to do, moving a little bit out of poetry and a little bit more into practicality, a little bit saying goodbye to that one who dreams and sleeps within each one of us, who is waiting to sing words, sounds, to take us to that place. To nourish our hearts with the waters, with the beauties, with the grace of the sweet foods of the soul. It is sad to leave this place to come down into the small, dirty domains, the hovels created by cults and cultures, the little knotted paradigms and tin-roofed huts we create to separate ourselves from the world that loves us, from the world that dances with the oceans and the waves, that dances in honor of our song, in honor of the one that waits sleeping within us to come down from those places a suffering, a pain, a grief, to wake up here in the small-scale paradigms where we are not known. And the world says to us every day, you are not important. And yet, it is in that hell, it is in that descent that we find ourselves here, in this body, in this cult, at this time, seeking to make the day, the night, a little bit more bearable, a little bit less lonely. To remember a little of the dream that we knew in the deep sleep of recent hours, but which can never come out of the dream to remind us that even here in the dungeon of ourselves, we are still one. And so it is here, in the language in the present day paradigms of modern life, that we must start our journey back to the goddess, that in the story of Finis the falcon, who comes to the youngest sister, the innocent one, and pecks at the window that the jealous older sisters have placed, that bleeds on the nails that the hating older sisters, that the cultish witches of the paradigm have nailed to attack our soul. Finis the falcon comes 3 nights, and the innocents cannot wake up through the drugged sleep of the cult. So he leaves a message, much like the message in the Russian tales that talk of the same dance. I have come, the soul, to love you, and you slept through my calls, you slept through my song. So I have gone away, and you must wear out 3 pairs of stone shoes. You must wear out 3 iron rods. You must eat 3 loaves of stone before you come the hard way, the way without grace, to my kingdom again. And if you do before I am married to someone else, before I have left your body completely, we may continue the marriage again. But it is an uncertain path, and it is always the fool that is misunderstood in every cult and every culture, because the fool will trade money for love, and the cult trades love for money. The fool will prize the soul's elixir, the draught of eternal life above all else. And the older brothers, the older sisters, will take every dress and every gown, the golden chariot. There is so much the blind state of the older sisters, the older brothers will put before their own soul. We come down here to see how can we put on the stone shoes. How can we get our iron staff? What is the bread that is so hard that it tastes like stone, that we must eat and chew piece by piece to find the bitterness that represents the journey to where we are now? Because we are not in the garden. We are in a hell of our own making. That we have confused with the divine. I feel very honored to have met a young woman. A young woman through whose gates I catch glimpses of myself and glimpses of you. Not the tattered remnants that you have been labeled with here, but something much more interesting that has no name. And so what I want to do here is talk about the hard road back to heaven. The heaven that can exist between any two individuals when the doors of self are unlocked. For it is a path that, while it ultimately ends in poetry, ultimately ends with a taking flight in dimensions our cult does not measure. It begins in the solid terrain of psychology and relationship practice. This is a mystery, a great mystery. And there are many keys to the doors that must open. What I want to do in the myopia of logic and rationality is guide you towards some of the doors that can open, that have opened for me with the love of my life, growing, touching my heart. I believe it is Jesus that references that we will find that light in the least. The least of people have the most. And what is referenced by this is not that they are the least, but rather that our cult doesn't know what it's talking about. So our cult will focus on education, our cult will focus on age, our cult will focus on appearance, our cult will focus on money, our cult will focus on race, it'll focus on teeth, it'll focus on pedigree, it will focus on the facility of language, on what you have, on what you make, on who you know. But this is not where the divine resides. When I met my sweetheart, I was at a low ebb or a high ebb. I was in a place of complete despair and loneliness in this world. And yet, I was closer to myself than I had been for a long time. Strange how it often goes that way. I was closer to myself, and so I had my list of the perfect partner. And this woman did not meet any criteria on my list. And yet, the call to come. I racked the narrowness of my mind to try and find why was I inviting her to come to me, when she was not what the I that I knew wanted. Why? I had only one thing I could think about, and that was to be of service. So this was the first gate that I opened. The gate of being of service to another human being. I said to myself, this woman does not have what you need. This woman does not have what you want. This woman is going to take time and energy. Why do you want any of those three things? And yet, she wanted to come. And in my meditation, which transcends the rational mind sometimes, I wanted her to come. I just did not know why. So I created a reason to be of service. I said to myself, okay, I will see what I can do to help this woman. And so I did. Now here's where we come to the door of service and the door of being loving. Now the door of service and the door of being loving is amongst several doors. In the one door, there is lust. I want to have sex with you. It doesn't matter what you want. My lust is not about you. It's not about what you want. It's about what I want. This is one of the doors. Life is about facing doors and deciding which door we enter. And one is, I want to have sex with you, I will follow that door. Another is, I need you, and I will follow that door. Helen Fisher talks about the three arenas in the brain: lust, emotional attachment, romantic love, the ideal. They are all about me. I idealize you. I want you. I need you. You have things that I need. This references Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that in the study of the healthiest people on the planet that are not dealing with major deformities because of trauma and crises, etc., that people go through a hierarchy of needs, and every human being needs these things. They need to survive physically. They need to feel secure in their survival physically. They need to love, they need to be loved, and they need to belong. This is the third need. When we are attached to someone, it is because they can meet one of or more of our needs. The fourth need is self-esteem. Now, I need you because you help me feel secure. You help me feel like I can survive. You help me look good. You help me feel like I belong. People like you, and so when I'm in relationship with you, I need you. It's about me. I lust after you. It's about me. I idealize you. You are my ideal. My ideal. I want to be closer to you for the pleasure that your embodiment of my ideal brings to me. I love sophisticated modern women, so I want you near me as a sophisticated modern woman. I like that ideal. Or I love simple innocence, so I want you near me as that. Being loving is not about the self. It is a discipline, and it is a choice. You fall in love, into need, into attachment as a child. Every child lusted and needed things from those around them, idealized parts of the parent. This happens organically. The choice to be loving is the one choice that is about the other. And this was the door through which I met my partner. I said to myself, since I cannot find any lust, any ideals, any need, this woman cannot do anything for me. But since there is a calling to spend time together, the only thing I can think of to do with that time is to be of service. And so, I was very weak at the time, but I got out of bed. I met her in a beautiful, fine restaurant, and I met her chaperone. And I listened and I asked how I could help. I listened and I asked how I could help. At the end of the visit, there were 5 problems I had identified in her life. And I gave her things that she could do, 5 things that she could do to solve each of those problems. And I gave her one of my books, 101 Choices on My Path to Well-Being. And I gave her my email address, and I said, if you do these 5 things, if you read my book, if that experience is valuable to you, and you believe I can help further, once you have finished doing these things, write to me and tell me what was useful, what was not useful in the book, in these ideas. And I will assist you further. This is a doorway that I have offered to over 100 human beings, and that none have taken. She took the invitation. She read the book. She implemented all 5 actions She wrote to me. She shared that they had all been helpful to varying degrees and why. And I asked, how can I help you again? Tell me what's going on in your life. And I gave her another book, this one by PDF. And she started reading, and she started writing. And I asked her to write the story of her life from every momentous event that was positive or negative, to share the story of her life and tell me as much as possible about herself, which corresponded with the user's manual that I had given to her. Who I am, what I like, what's happened in these parts of my life, etc. And I had given this invitation to more than 200 women, asking them to invite me into their world, to take the time, the attention to detail to help me see them at a level that would allow me to honor them, that would allow me to connect with them as a partner. And no one had. The last woman that wanted to marry me had said she would do it for 6 months. She never got more than a page and a half, and I talked with her about the need more than 50 times. She was always going to do it. And that was as close as it had ever gotten. And Jen tapped away on her phone, and a week later I got a 35-page, beautifully written doorway into her world. Now, this doorway is a doorway of vulnerability. It is a doorway of trust. It is a doorway of transparency. And it helped me understand the patterns of her life, which significantly included the deepest traumas and the deepest wounds of her life. Now, the medicine for the deepest trauma and the deepest wounds is always the opposite of the wound. If you get the message you are worthless, the medicine for worthlessness is the message that you are the most precious and valuable human being on the planet. Not compared to everyone else, but that you know that you are priceless. The message, my feelings don't matter, the message, your feelings matter more than anything else. The message, you are a mistake, the message, you are a miracle. Within the fabric of a story, they are both true. If you really understand, it's a miracle that we survive as human beings, this abuse and this ignorance and this protocol, etc. The wounds that a cult rains down on its people are horrific. And it is astounding that we are still alive, still breathing after all this pain. The doorway in was being of service. Now, being of service means helping another human being as a willed discipline to climb through Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The first need is security, about your survival. Well, survival, and then security about survival. My partner had survival and security about survival okay. Not great, but okay. But when it came to love and belonging, she was at about 10% of the love and belonging that would help her feel deeply loved and supported. Not because she'd done anything wrong, but the history of shame and abuse in her life. And so the need that we focused on was primarily self-love and love and belonging. So I introduced her to inner child meditation. I introduced her to a process of journaling. I participated with her in the ritual because I noticed that she had internalized the self-hatred that had been dumped on her since infancy. I thought it was very important that some person on the outside fight the self-hatred and the self-loathing. And so I asked her to send me the diary every day. And the diary would initially read something like, I did this, which I would look at and say, well, that was a very intelligent, courageous thing to do. And then it would say I was my auntie told me I was an idiot, blah, 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 blah. And I would see the shame hitting her. And then I would see her join in with her abusers and tell herself that she was stupid or something. When she wasn't stupid, she just didn't have the experience or practice to fight her abusers, who were dumping their own shames and inadequacies onto her as one of the few innocent people in the system. And so I would fight for her. I would send her audio recordings so she could feel the emotion that says, no, that was a great thing you did there, and I'm sick of hearing people in your life complaining about this and this and this. And I would also shift the emphasis over to show how they're responsible. You know, what her auntie could have been doing instead of that, how her auntie could be loving and supporting her instead of attacking and blaming her for her own, all of this. Your auntie is angry at you because you didn't find the phone that your auntie lost. Well, fuck you, auntie. Why did you, your auntie loses the phone. Why doesn't she find the phone? So just this opening, when you have an abusive cult dynamic, it entrains individuals into an identity of the one who gets abused. And no one fights that because we like scapegoats. In a cult that has a lot of pain, we find scapegoats and we give them our pain. And the ones that need the most love and attention take the pain as part of payment for getting attention and energy, for being able to exist in the system. But it doesn't mean that there's anything rational about the abuses dumped on a scapegoat. If you read the ancient history of scapegoats, they would just take two goats. One they would see as the holy sacrifice, the other they would smear with blood and throw rocks at it and beat it out of town, as to hold all the shame and shadow of the cult. And that became the scapegoat, which we think we're so civilized we don't do it with goats anymore. We do it with human beings. We do it with sensitive human beings who need love and attention. And the only role that we say, okay, you want some attention and love? Fine, be our scapegoat. Be the one that we attack and blame and beat. And then feel terrible and blame yourself, and we'll let you exist here. Because we need someone to attack and loathe and beat. And it might as well be you, since you want some attention. This is a role within a family system and within a cult system. So she was in that role. And so the way that I helped was to fight for her innocence and her dignity every day in every area that I heard that she was getting punished for stuff that either had nothing to do with her or had as much to do with the adult that was punishing her, who should know better. It's like, you're older, you've got more money, it's your house, you fix the problem, don't blame the child. So this is kind of classic shame-based dumping onto the younger people in a system. So I fought with that. And then, since her lifeline of support was through her phone, and she used to go to this park so that she could talk to me without being bullied. And while she was in this park, someone came up and stole her phone. So I got her a new phone. because no one's there supporting, for her, such a big focus. And so just taking a stand for her esteem and her love and belonging on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I would spend 15 minutes every day reading what she sent me and taking a stand for her. Now this went on for 2 weeks and was the first doorway, which continues, meaning I've continued to step into this doorway over and over again. 2 days ago, she lost her glasses swimming in the ocean, and I bought her a pair of new glasses. Taking a stand for physical survival and security and well-being. This is an experience of growth. And she stepped into this door in a way that, I don't do this for almost anyone. I've never done this before to this degree. But she was working 4 hours a day to lift herself. She'd get up and do an inner child meditation, then she'd do yoga, then she'd work on her diary, then she'd start reading this book on cultural literacy and self-esteem and healthy relationships. Then she'd watch this TED Talk, which I had recommended. And she was spending 4 to 6 hours a day investing in her own well-being at my suggestion, which was taking me 15 minutes a day. And I had to see that she was growing enormously, that she was learning, growing, and that she was an incredible human being that had just been shamed and shat on her entire life from all sides, and that this was wrong, and that someone should do something about it. And since I was there, let me be of service and do something about this. So this was door number 1, service and the choice to be loving. Now, the choice to be loving is mainly differentiated by questions. What do you need? Will this idea help? Do you have what you need to take action on this idea? Okay, go do it. Let me know how it works. Now, empowering her is a very, very big key of being of service, because otherwise you're just creating complete dependency. It doesn't help anything. But when you're being loving and you want to build esteem, her esteem went up enormously, because one person is caring enough to put her interests above any other thing, to guide and validate and appreciate everything she does. I appreciate, and I challenge all the self-hatred. Line by line. No, I disagree. That was not a dumb thing you did. That was a very smart thing you did. You've just got 3 or 4 dumb people around you that think that reading books is weird because they're illiterate. It doesn't mean that it's weird. It doesn't mean that it's dumb. It just means you're in an illiterate culture. So you're doing intelligent things. They're too dumb to understand it. Of course, you're being singled out. Tell them to go fuck themselves and keep reading your book. Day after day after day to challenge what's going on in her world. So this is being loving, being of service. This is a very, very satisfying, I didn't know it. It just seemed like the thing to do, but it was a very, very satisfying thing to do. It gives a lot, I discovered that I was having more fun in the 15 minutes a day I was spending coaching her as a service than I was having in my entire life. It's like, I could be writing one of my books, not as fun as helping this person. I could be going for a walk, not as fun as reading the diary and advocating for her. Now, notice one of the traps in the myopia of the isolated self, the delusion of the isolated self. I think I'm fighting for this person I hardly know just on principle. But the truth is I'm fighting for myself. there are parts of me that have never been born. There are parts of me that have been beaten and scapegoated since birth. And there are parts of me that not a single person in my life is advocating for. And when I advocate for that part in her, that part in me gets hope. Because rightly it says, well, if Dane will fight for the innocence of this stranger over here, maybe one day someone or Dane will fight for the innocence in here. We are integrated. What we do to another, we are doing to ourselves. When we are making the greatest sacrifice for the honor and dignity of someone else's soul, we are feeding and watering our own soul. This was a discovery. As a Westerner, I had no idea this was going to happen. I just learned, wow, why am I happier doing this than any other thing I could imagine? So this was the first door. Now the second door was trauma. Meaning, in her diary, I noticed that she had elements of PTSD, which thankfully I had just been reading about in Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. So, when she mentioned that she had cut herself and wanting to commit suicide as an 8-year-old, you can imagine how much pain it takes for an 8-year-old to not only be self-mutilating, but to be seriously thinking and planning about suicide. So when I noticed this pattern and I correlated it to trauma, I also noticed that, as with most unhealed trauma, it can be re-triggered. And so I noticed that it was very fragile in several areas, and so I educated her all about trauma. I made sure that she didn't carry any shame. I said, this is what human beings do when they do not have intelligent guardians and an ethical church. When any child is in your kind of situation, statistically, self-mutilation is one of the coping strategies to distract and internalize the wound and feel more control. You have to read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, to know what I'm talking about. But I knew what I was talking about from my own analysis and experience in working with the book. And I'd also met several women in America who self-mutilated, and they were amazing people. And I didn't understand what was going on at the time, but I did after the trauma. And so educating her about trauma, protecting her from trauma, taking a stand for her, and really letting her know it was wrong what had happened to her, and it was wrong that no one had apologized, and it was wrong that she had been blamed and scapegoated. It was wrong, it was wrong, it was wrong. And caring and feeling and asserting and asserting and asserting. This was the second door, the door of service, education, protection. And later, it was a couple of weeks after this protocol of diary and writing and stuff, 2 or 3 weeks later, when she's already working 4 to 6 hours a day, growing her skills, healing, becoming more self-aware, responding to suggestions, building her body. And I'm noticing this is the most amazing experience of my day. Now I'm starting to get selfish, if you understand, because I thought I was doing all this as a service, and I had no idea why else I would do it. And I just thought, well, I'll make a sacrifice and try and help someone. Only to discover that it's the most rewarding part of my life. Now that I've discovered that, I'm not an idiot, so I want more of the most rewarding part of my life. But I don't know, since the whole relationship is long distance. I met her once for the dinner, had no intention or thought of compatibility or anything there, and was just being helpful. And this whole thing is happening via email. I'll send her an audio recording, she'll send me an audio recording or a detailed diary, and it's a daily exchange. And then I've read the book by email, and I've commented on it in audio recordings sent by email. And sometimes a certain dosage of something is medicinal and more of it is toxic. It's a little bit of belladonna can help with the heart. Too much, it kills you. And I didn't know whether I would be more helpful to her as this distant mentor just talking every day, or if I'd be more helpful close. I didn't know. And so the way I did it was I said, you have got me as a mentor as long as you want and as long as you're growing. That's it. You need to get a sense of what is good for you. And I want to support that, whatever that is. And we never have to see each other in person again. This can go many different ways. What I want to do is what you think is good for your life. I said, however, I would be open to. I didn't want to push it because, particularly with Asian cultures, there's a real emphasis on pleasing. So I wanted to let her know that in my mind, I thought it was in my interest to get closer to her at this point. But that, I didn't want to say that. I just wanted her to be aware that it was a possibility so that I could gauge her response. So I said, if it was something you were interested in at some point, I would be open to spending more time with you in person, either as a friend or a lover. And you can think about it in your own time, but regardless of any of that, I'm going to be supportive of this. And she responded immediately that she liked the idea of spending time together. She liked the idea of being lovers more than being friends. And she thought it would be good for her. And so this then led to the next doorway because I learned that her trauma symptoms, which included shaking at times, twitching legs, sometimes compulsive itching, could migrate into grief and into release if I held her very tightly. And if she could feel the security of being completely held, then the physical symptom would migrate back into the overwhelming emotion she couldn't deal with as a child. Loved and held in the overwhelming emotion she couldn't deal with as a child, she could then deal with it as an adult with someone there caring for her and holding her. The two of us together could discharge then the energy, and her physical symptoms would clear up permanently. In waves, meaning it's not a black or white thing, but this was the ritual. So, for example, in one hour holding healing process, maybe 5 to 10% of some deep horrific horror in childhood would well up in her body. We would work through it emotionally in holding, and on the other side of that, I would notice, she's not twitching as much, she's not itching as much, she's not hating her body as much. Okay. So this was part of body holding and protection, that I'm here. And a big part of that is I feel honored to be present for someone's trauma, number one. Two, I feel passionate that she should have a protective ally to deal with that level of trauma and abuse. I feel passionate that every human being should have that. I felt even more passionate because I didn't get that myself. And I knew how much it had harmed my body and my psyche. That there was not a single adult in my entire cult, whether it was a therapist or a parent or a friend, that would take an interest like that. That was profoundly negligent. So I was furious about this as I was reading what worked in trauma and realizing, that I've been set up for trauma my whole life. I was, angry at the cult I'd been born into, and I wanted to make a difference. So everything that I resented and felt sad and lonely and terrified that nobody did for me, I wanted to do it for her as an opportunity to pray and an opportunity to vote for a world like that. Now, I discovered it was a tremendous honor. It was very interesting. It was very healing. And that again, as I would take these strong stands for her little girl, you don't fucking give a 6-year-old this to carry, you idiotic cult. Get this off this 6-year-old and give her space to mature. Fuck you! You take a stand to protect the innocence that needs support. And I will not bow down to a fucked up cult that is too dumb to teach parents the basics of emotional literacy and parenting. This is a fucked up hellhole. Get the fuck off of these young kids. Now, I've never seen an adult protect a child with this level of intensity, and that is a tragedy. That is why we have 1 in 7 Americans who are addicts. In Gabor Mate's work with addiction, the DEA tries to point out that it's the drugs that are so addictive. But when you do a study with rats that will addict to cocaine or something, when they're in a lab with no playmates, with no nourishing food alternatives, they will addict. But you give the same rats or monkeys sexual partners, playmates, nature, community, and you don't fuck them up with trauma by the scientists, tagging them and labeling them and shining lights in their eyes to traumatize them, and they don't want the drug. The drug is not addictive. It's a coping mechanism for the trauma of the lab environment for an animal. And the same is true for people. When people do not have deeply repressed traumatic memories with no one helping them to hold it, they don't want to drink themselves into a fucking stupor to escape the pain that nobody's helping to lift off their mind. They don't want to cut themselves. It's just better than feeling overwhelmed with shame from some memory that was done to you, and everyone wants to keep it a secret to protect the abusive structure of the cult, to protect the family honor at the expense of the child. It's fucked up. Deeply, deeply fucked up. And by being able to take that stand for her, I let indirectly, there's some part of me that got the message, it wasn't okay what happened to you either. Because at least you've met someone, yourself, who is upset about this and cares enough about an innocent person to take a stand for them. And if one person is furious about that and willing to do something, maybe there's another few human beings somewhere on this fucked up planet where people will do the same. Rather than play the cult bullshit of, we don't like angry people, and punishing the people who are abused and punishing the people who try and take a stand for it. Right? And go shoot yourselves, you fucking assholes, if you can't take a stand for a child. We don't need cowards to raise another generation. We need adults and human beings. And we don't have that in government, and we don't have that in the church, and we do not have that in this community. We have cowards. that abuse their kids behind closed doors and nobody does a goddamn thing about it. And I'm sick of it. This is the door of anger. Because on the other side of this anger is an innocence that is beautiful and that's worth protecting. And I've never seen a fucking adult or a grown-up child in this cult take a stand and stake their life on the innocence of that child. I've never seen it. And that is a shame. Not on the abuse survivors. It is a fucking shame on the cult that raises abusive people by systematically avoiding emotional literacy, avoiding trauma literacy, avoiding abuse literacy in schools, perpetuating bullying right and left, going into sociopathic capitalistic paradigms that again prey on the weak rather than offer a helping hand. It's fucked up. And on the other side of this anger, there is an innocence and a beauty that is not visible to people with the apathy and the stupidity to turn away from the abuse that is happening all around us. And it is visible when someone will take up the sword and fight to protect that innocence. Now, this woman taught me to fight because my parents told me I was a bad person. That all my abuse was, of course, for my own good. I mean, you cannot get a more fucked up cult than this when it comes to parenting. My cult abused my parents. It's not personal. This is a fucked up cult that doesn't bother teaching a goddamn thing to a goddamn parent. Thinks that the most sophisticated ritual on the history of the planet, raising an individual to be a healthy human being, it should just be winged. Oh yeah, fighter planes will train you for 10 fucking years to fight. But raise a child, just muddle along, make your mistakes, and let them clean up the mess. It's fucked up. Now, this anger is shamed in a cult that is emotionally illiterate and doesn't understand the role of anger. There's no place for it. You can't talk like this on TV. People might actually get the feeling that something was wrong and it wouldn't be comfortable. So the doorway of trauma is a big one, and it is ongoing. It is ongoing. Every time I see a collapsed self in despair that's shaming itself in myself and in her, I fight for it. Because that is what happens to 2-year-olds and 5-year-olds and 7-year-olds that do not have a single adult in their environment. An adult is someone willing to sacrifice their expedience, their addiction, their shame, and their stupidity to protect the innocence of a child. An adult will put themselves in front of the stupidity of the culture to protect their child. Well, she didn't have adults. I didn't have adults either. Did you? How do you know? There are so many adult children just doing to their children what was done to them, and nobody's talking about it. And this is the next door. We are not going to be bound by this cult any longer. We are walking out of the prison of normalcy. Because normal is what got us here. And we do not want to stay in this shithole any longer. Let's go out of the prison into some fresh air. Now, this is a very important doorway that I guided both of us through. And it's a doorway out of normalcy. Now, I've known for some time that there are choices every single day where it comes down to this. If you do this, You'll look normal and you'll be miserable. If you do this, everyone's going to look at you, or it's not going to fit into the paradigm, and you'll be very, very happy without hurting anyone. Wearing a bathrobe that feels comfortable, and you want to go out to the beach in a bathrobe, or shopping in a bathrobe. Oh, can't have It's comfortable, it's beautiful. People don't like things that are unnormal. The question is, why? There's not a logical reason. There's just these taboos that we don't do this. And you know it's stupid because you ask them why, and it just goes round in circles. Well, we just don't do it. Why? Because we don't. Because we don't. There's no one being harmed. It's actually much more efficient. Now, these little gestures actually liberate the psyche. You go shopping in a bathrobe, you're telling yourself you don't have to believe stupid ideas that are unscientific just because everyone else is doing it. You don't have to buy into the crap that says that breast size is more important in the health or sexuality of a relationship than emotions. It isn't, by the way. You can have no breasts, or whatever it is, the sexy archetype of breasts varies by person. And the emotional connection of those people is going to affect the pleasure, the satisfaction, the dimensionality, and the health of that relationship 10 times, 8 times more. And it's going to be completely ignored. You don't look for people looking for this emotional criteria and this emotional criteria. No, I like, oh, look at that breast. Oh, my breast, I have to get an implant. All this bullshit. So when you start stepping outside of simple things, bathrobes, the way you're supposed, no, you shouldn't be barefoot, you shouldn't do this, all these different things that don't hurt anyone, but they're just things that are being programmed and brainwashed in. Everyone does them, so nobody doesn't do them. You break those, and suddenly you can see with a new set of eyes. You start realizing, oh, I don't die because I'm not normal. My life is better and better and better. So out of the door of normalcy, this was a big thing for her to take her through that. Like, I would hug her in an airport or something, and she'd say, oh, people would see us. And I'd say, fuck them. Every one of them. Tune them out. What does your heart say? Do that. If you don't want to hug me because you don't feel close, then let's talk about it. If you want to hug me, do it. Fuck them. They are not more important than our relationship growing. Who gives a damn what they think about any of it? Now, I've got judgments and stuff going through my mind because I've got all kinds of judgments in my culture about this. People are going to judge me because you're young. Fuck them. I am not going to follow ageism any more than racism or this, that, the other. I'm going to follow what's helping us grow as human beings. Fuck them. This is a doorway out of normalcy, and it's a very important one. And it ties into the next doorway, which is love versus chauvinism. Now, we are a fucked up chauvinistic cult. We've treated women like shit for thousands of years. We've institutionalized that governmentally, in corporations and in the church. There are still plenty of churches today that cannot allow women, regardless of capability, to play the role of a man. It's fucked up. We don't have Mary isn't as important as Jesus in the Christian church. It's fucked up. Now, it's not just the gender stereotype, though. I, as a man, have learned that my feelings are not as important as my mind. That if I know what 380,000 times 285 is, that makes me really important because I'm smart. But if I feel shitty, that doesn't matter. That's just a feeling. That's feminine. Now, I've learned to be a chauvinist as an American, as every American learns how to be a chauvinist. And it devalues everything feminine. Everything. Dreams, feminine, not important. Feelings, not important. Sensitivity, too sensitive, too emotional, not important. Art, sissy, all, anything like, no. And don't be gay, and all this bullshit. It's a complete hostility towards the feminine presence in men and women. It's stupid, and it's ill-informed. And so when you step out of normalcy, one of the things that you can start to do is honor the feminine that has been denied and broken and attacked and shamed inside of the relationship and inside every person, and is going on all around. Every single day there are messages, be it on TV, be it on business, where your femininity is treated like shit. It's not even asked about. And your masculinity, oh, you made some money, oh, that's important, how did you do that? Oh, you had a feeling? I don't want to hear about it. Those are just feelings. Don't be too, oh, it's too much. It's complete, utter chauvinism. Now, in a very chauvinistic culture, you don't even realize you're chauvinistic. You're too dumb to know that you're dumb. Unfortunately, that says a lot about our culture. Anyway. When you're really honest, when I'm really honest, and I look at what this cult does to its people, as statistics, 1 in 3 domestic relationships in the United States includes domestic violence. 1 in 100 Americans locked up at $100,000 a year in a concrete box. Healthy and humane, sociopathic. 1 in 7 Americans, addicts to a substance. 1 in 3 Americans, addicts to compulsive behavior to manage anxiety and pain that they're not dealing with. 98% out of 100 Americans, emotionally illiterate. Could not describe their feelings accurately if they wanted to, let alone knowing what to do with them in a healthy way to transform their reality into something amazing. We are a profoundly stupid cult that is so stupid it doesn't understand that it's stupid. And so it gets angry at anyone that points out the many absurdities, and righteously, and then continues bullying and punishing the children right and left and coming up with all the reasons. Well, I have to go to work. Who comes up with these fucked up ideas? Tribes in the Amazon are not beating this and that and the other and shaming and sugar addicting their kids and all this and that because they have to go to work. So you think you're superior to them? You can't figure out a better way to treat your child than a tribe in an Amazon has zero science and education? I mean, give me a fucking break. We treat our kids worse than many cultures 500,000 years ago. So, and it's more the Western. So the Western is more sociopathic than the Eastern. But look at the data. This is dumb. When's the emotional literacy coming to school? When's the psychology coming to school? When's the small business training coming to school? When's the yoga that is emotionally regulating coming to school? When is anything science-based going to come into our cult, as opposed to let's just make a lot of money and then get addicted to something to numb the myopia of our lives and make some more money and spend it and know absolutely nothing and just die like so many of our elderly, feeling empty and lonely, not sure whether they're wanted, certainly not feeling honored. Tribes 1,000 years ago paid more honor to their dead than we do today. How's that intelligent? It's like, think about it. But you've got to start stepping outside of normalcy. So I pushed pretty hard to, because a good Asian person worries about everyone else more than yourself. A good American worries about yourself more than everyone else. There's a good balance in the middle. The world needs happy, healthy couples. So if the world is sabotaging good couple relationships because you can't do this and you can't do this and you can't do this, that should be going on. The world needs more oxytocin, it needs less dopamine and less adrenaline. Hugs do that. So if the world is going to shame hugs, it's an idiot. So get rid of the idiocy, break the taboo. Now, I paid a lot of attention to her dreams, and I started realizing that her dreams were a good clue into the unconscious part of our relationship that she was not comfortable talking about. So if she hated a man in the dream, for example, I would get to know the man and try and figure out, what part of that man had something to do with me. And then I would turn it around and say, okay, let's look at how I'm like that man and how some part of you hates me. Because that's a reasonable feeling for that kind of behavior. So let's validate it and let's learn from it. And let's again break the Asian taboo of, oh no, you're wonderful and you're perfect. No, I'm not. Certainly not wonderful and perfect. I'm amazing in this area and horrible in this area. Let's deal with reality. So some parts of you probably hate the horrible parts. Okay, let's bring it into light. So I listened and learned from her dreams a lot. I'm very grateful for her dreams. Of course, that's breaking chauvinism. No intelligent Westerner is supposed to learn anything about dreams. They're too dumb. Poetry. She and I would write poetry and again see vistas. I would see some of that transcendent light coming through the poetry. I wanted her to be self-reliant, and so she left her golf caddying job to make our relationship easier so we could spend more time together. So I helped her start an art business, making custom greeting cards that are phenomenal and custom paintings that I think are quite lovely. And so she would do the discipline of that. And that also brought a lot of love and feminine energy into our relationships, which is very healing for me as a chauvinist American who's trying to heal the chauvinism. Singing. She would sing to me sometimes. I would sing. Again, part of going past the chauvinism. In the West, you learn that if you are going to be artistic, it's not your joy that matters. That's feminine. It's your perfectionism. So if you sing with a perfect voice, okay, you can be a sing. If you sing out of pitch and this and that, then you're an idiot, right? No, that's not how I see it. I see that if you sing and it brings a positive energy into a space, that the energy is more important than the song anyway. The unseen is more important than the seen. The feminine is more important than the ritual of the doing. You'll get better with practice, and the real important thing is, does the ritual of singing or drawing lift someone? You look at a painting like this. I started painting, and is it good? Is it bad? Who gives a shit? I navigated part of my psyche while painting this painting. I have no illusions that the technique is masterful. It's not. The point is not to produce a technique that art critics say anything about at all. The whole point is the experience of taking something that's buried on the inside and getting it out and relating to our own soul through the art. That's the point. And if no one ever sees it except me and my sweetheart, that's just fine. The soul is valuable for the soul, not because of money. That is the chauvinism that says unless it makes money, da, da, da. So just, fuck all that. Let's make art. Care for feelings. Care for feelings. I can't tell you how much shame is in the United States in American women who apologize for having deep feelings and busily work to suppress them in every way imaginable. So I did the exact opposite. When my partner would say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm needy. No, none of that. Get away, chauvinism. I'm not sorry you're needy. I'm honored that you trust me enough to need me. Now, what do you need? Well, my 2-year-old is scared about this, my 4-year-old is scared. This is the next doorway in our relationship, ages, inner ages. It's my job to honor and respect every part of myself and every part of my partner that makes an appearance on the stage of our relationship, period. It is not my job to criticize and tell any part of her what they should be feeling, what they should be thinking, or that they're bad for thinking or feeling anything that they're thinking. My job is to understand. Oh, okay. So why is your 2-year-old having a panic attack right now? Well, my 2-year-old thinks that I've done something wrong because you're not smiling. Ah, thank you for telling me. Do you want to know why I'm not smiling? I'm not smiling because I'm furious. I'm fuming at the fact that, I've just heard all this stuff going on again in your life. Your parents are still trying to abuse you, and I am furious, and I'm even more furious because I don't know what to do about it, because I'm in such a fucked up cult that this isn't as interesting as Seinfeld to the idiots that have a choice between learning about trauma and Seinfeld. This is outrageous. I'm furious, and so I'm not happy at all. It has nothing to do with you. Does that help? No, my 2-year-old still thinks she did something wrong. Okay, I'm going to let all that go. How are you, 2-year-old? You're a wonderful 2-year-old. None of this is your fault. I'm not angry with you. May I give you a hug? May I? Okay. How do you feel? Do you know you're loved? You know this is not your fault? It's not your fault that I'm so angry. It's not your fault that you were treated like shit. It's not your fault that no one helped you here. None of this is your fault. You understand that, 2-year-old? You are beautiful. And I'm so sorry that you've grown up in this world. How do you feel? This is the transcendence and the magic of honoring the selves that come up. You need an hour? I'll make time. No, I do not have to get to work. Work should be restructured to facilitate healthy human beings being honored in their own psyche. If it can't do that, we've got to get rid of it. We are not slaughtering the psyche anymore to fit into the stupidity of our paradigms. They didn't do it 1,000 years in the Amazon 1,000 years ago. They're not doing it now in parts of the Amazon. Why are we so dumb that we have to shut up one part after another to sacrifice ourselves on the altar of cult to end up fat, addicted, alone, and sick, and have no idea why we feel this way when it's called success in front of a 65-inch TV eating potato chips and having no fucking clue what we're feeling. Now, this age can go through multiple things. I might spend 5 minutes with a 2-year-old, then it jumps to 8 years old, then it jumps to 15 years old, and then we come back up to present day time. You do it if it shows up. If the guest knocks at the door, you open the door and bring it in as hospitably as you can. I'm so sorry, 2-year-old. I'm just on the way out. I have to get some money at the ATM. My apologies. We don't design banks particularly intelligently. We haven't even figured out how to bring them online in many cases, so I'm still having to use paper. Not your fault. I'll be back for you. The other thing, so we've gone through service, love versus chauvinism, the doorway of the inner ages. I ask my partner about 3 times every single day, how old are you? And what is this part of you feeling? Now, 3 times a day, there's a 95% probability that she is not feeling her present 24-year-old self. There's a probability she's feeling 5 years old. I'm probably not feeling 43 years old. I'm probably feeling 2 years old, 8 years old, 12 years old. Now, this is just bringing consciousness, the blessing of consciousness, onto where we are emotionally. Now, mentally, all the ages have access to the data. But emotionally is the key thing. This is the feminine. Now, we tend to get stuck in the ages we're traumatized. If you're traumatized a lot, you can be stuck at multiple different times and stuff. Now, those traumatized parts relate to reality differently because they've nearly been killed multiple times to suit sociopathic, uninformed power structures that do not put their well-being first. Well, this creates terror. That is trauma. Well, you don't expect a traumatized individual, particularly that's frozen in a biological state, to just shift. That comes into that deep holding, for example, and healing. Now, the other doorway is sensitivity. No feeling is too sensitive. Now, there's a book, The Highly Sensitive Person, by Dr. Elaine Aron. There's another book called Quiet. Read them. 10 to 20% of the population have to deal with this. I have to deal with it. My partner has to deal with it. It just means that everything happens 2 to 3 times louder for the sensitive than it does for everyone else, which means it impacts them more, which means that they're wonderful at revealing hidden patterns that nobody else is paying attention to because they hear them so loudly. Sensitivity is a very important doorway to honor, to understand, and to, again, push back to the cult and say, no, we are not too sensitive. You have very self-centeredly created an environment that works well for 80% of the people and is way over the top for 10 to 20% of the people. You're too dumb to figure out that there are 2 groups of people, typical human Western arrogance. You're too dumb to figure out that there are even 2 types of people. You're too self-centered to figure out that because someone's not in your camp, that they should be the one changing. You're too self-centered to understand that if you stick people with highly sensitive ears in a rock concert as a metaphor, that they're going to have absolute agony, and you're too self-centered to care that they're in agony so that you can enjoy your rock concert. And so you fucked up normal Western sociopathic thinking while imposing your version of reality onto the 10 to 20% of people that are different, not better, not worse, different than you. And you're too dumb to know it. And you don't want to do anything about it. But it fucking hurts. It's fucking rude. It's unscientific. 10 to 20% of human brains are neurologically more sensitive than other people's brain. Now, we're too dumb to study the kind of science that matters. We're much too busy building weapons and this and that. That's dumb. More stupidity on the part of our cult. This is not the fault of the sensitive. The sensitive is in pain because of your stupidity and your lack of sensitivity. You've got to do something about it. If you're halfway intelligent and want to hold on to your delusions of compassion and civilization, you got to do something about it. You got to actually pay attention to the science. Heaven help us. Now, I take a stand for her sensitivity, if anyone batters it, and I watch her face. I'm sometimes, you see the anger I've gotten here. This is too much for a 4-year-old if she's regressed into that state. So I have to keep attuning and learning to attune to her rather than getting caught up in myself. That's relating. That's actually treating the other like yourself as opposed to just, this is me, take it or leave it, good old Western stupidity. Now, this is a key doorway. Now, the other is honor. Now, this is also a key thing, and it ties in with the love versus chauvinism, the sensitivity, the ages. The first thing, I have never lied to a partner, and I've never cheated on a partner. Now, this does not mean that I haven't had sex with 100 lovers. It does not mean that I haven't been polyamorous for a year and decided it wasn't for me. It does not mean that I do not feel attracted to a noticeable percentage of women in proximity. No. It just means that I understand the importance of boundaries. I have control of my own body. I do not have to act on lust regardless of its intensity or context. I do not believe, for the most part, in secrets. We're doing a little bit of experiment now because I've never ever had a secret. And we're trying to figure out if some of my ages are happier and some of her ages are happier if certain things are secret. It's very new for me. I've never had a secret with any of my lovers or partners. But truth, about 100% of feelings. Occasionally I feel hatred. I tell my partner. Occasionally I feel helpless. I tell my partner. Occasionally I feel absolute frustration and rage. I tell my partner. I don't tell her it because she's doing something wrong or she's a bad person. I tell her so she understands what makes me feel different things and that I am feeling it so that we can be with each other where we are rather than where we're pretending to be. So I pay attention to all of the feelings, I tell her all the feelings, and then I listen to all her feelings. So if I feel hatred and it's her 2-year-old showing up feeling desperate about being abandoned, then I listen to the desperate and abandoned, and I hold that 2-year-old until it becomes the 8-year-old and the 10-year-old and the 24-year-old can understand it. We take the time to deal with feelings. I listen and watch her body. She doesn't always tell me, Dane, I'm feeling nervous and angry about this. Sometimes her body just turns away. I say, what's that? How old are you right now? Okay, you're 6 years old. Why did your 6-year-old have that look? Oh, nothing. Bullshit. Of course it's not nothing. What is it? Why did your 6-year-old have that look? Well, she's angry at you because you didn't invite her to go out on the motorcycle ride. Ah, okay. Did she know that? Yeah, she knew that. Why didn't you tell me? Well, I thought you wanted to go alone and I didn't want to burden you with my 6-year-old. Well, that's a bad choice. How am I going to help your 6-year-old feel safe if you don't even let her talk to me? Maybe I will let her come sometime, maybe I won't. Maybe I do want space, but you're not including me. You're not telling me what's going on. So you're now sulking that you've blocked me from having the chance to do something you assumed I would reject and you didn't even tell me what it was. That's not fair. It's not fair on your 6-year-old. It's not fair on me. It's not fair on our relationship. I want to know, what does your 6-year-old want right now? Does she still want to go out on the motorbike? Okay, let's go. So what's going on? Truth in the body, truth around feeling, truth around emotional state. Going back to esteem, I believe in growing healthy relationships, and I believe in working hard on that. This video is an act of service. Looking through these gates this morning, looking into the innocence and the transcendent beauty of my partner, looking into the wonder of her soul and spirit, and feeling honored and filled, drinking deep the innocence and the blessing of her presence. I felt in the presence of God and Goddess today. And I know that going through these doorways has taken me into this domain in the psyche of our relationship. And I know that it is my partner going through these doorways with me that has let us go off screen, outside of the view of our cult's dogmas, outside of the view of normalcy. And I wanted to create a map for you, a map that might take you into this domain so that you can join us in the halls of hallowed beauty that reside within each human being and which have been forgotten for too long. Thank you for your presence and attention.